All right. So everyone, thank you for, first of all, some of you may have presented earlier, excellent presentations. This is a great conference. Very grateful to Methodist for organizing this. Love the way this is going. So what I'm going to do here is that I'm going to increment forward in time to the current, to talk about the current generation or the current level of technology that we've developed for NASA to support medical autonomy for crew members on deep space missions. So I did a brief introduction of what we call Vulcan, which is the first generation of technology to support. And again, we started with ultrasound. We can use other medical devices, but that was the one that NASA directed us to do because that will be most likely the imaging modality that gets flown for deep space missions, unless other technologies come online that are equivalently lightweight and appropriate to use in spaceflight conditions. So the next evolution of this technology, and I'm going to orient you folks to the slide reel here because it has a lot of good information in it. So we've evolved it to what we call the Intelligent Medical Crew Assistant. So in addition to the traditional interface that you saw a little bit in my presentation, which is clicks and some dialogue, usually it's one way from the augmented reality system, giving you text or other or audible guidance. The system now has a dialogue-based artificial intelligence layer so that you can talk to it. Now, whether you're a physician or a medically trained person or not, you can still ask it questions. So you can start the process for an emergent medical situation by asking it to help you with signs and symptoms and things like that. So on this screen, this is the current evolved screen. So in here, we can take very standard clinically approved materials. For example, if you're trying to look at the heart and you want to know what is it am I looking at? If I'm not a trained cardiologist or physician, I really don't know what all these dark spots and blobs are. So it can show you, or if you are trained and you need a refresher, it can show you the reference things of what you should be trying to do. And again, all of the stepwise procedures you need to go through to conduct the examination. What you can see right here is, and just real quick note, so for the purposes, this is leading up to pericardiocentesis. So we've actually had a company, IMCA, build us a pericardiocentesis fixture that is somewhat relatively haptically and also spatially, structurally realistic to what a pericardium should look like in a heart. And so what we're showing you here is two things. First is in the real-time live streaming image from the ultrasound probe, right? Probe is looking for these structures. The first larger box on the outside is the machine learning identifying the general area and structure of interest. And again, we're just showing you the secret sauce behind the curtain. The second box in here is the machine learning identifying what it believes to be a pericardial effusion. So again, I'm taking a little time on the front side to orient you to things. Later on in the presentation, I'm going to show you live video of the system. So just, hang tight. I won't go too, again, I said some of these things in my earlier talk, but really what NASA has communicated to the technology community is, look, they need some help developing the medical toolkit that's going to get flown to Mars. I mean, obviously it's going to have to be very lightweight in so much as it can enable autonomous operation, meaning the crew doesn't require support from mission control in Houston. Background information, so medical knowledge base for general things, diagnostic support. You saw Vulcan doing ultrasound. Also, medical management decision-making capability. So there may be ongoing physiological or other changes, psychological changes that go on with crew members. So the ability to track that over time, and if intervention or care needs to be administered, the system can help in decision support on that. If you're doing a procedure and it's not an emergency that you need to do it right now, you can train and refresh. Again, most astronauts come from a technical pilot aviation background, not all of them. even physicians do like stepwise procedural guidance. Tell me exactly what I need to do, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. The other thing is hands-free operation. With using an AR head-mount display comfortably fitted to the operator, you have both hands free. You don't have to turn around and look at a display screen on another device or look away from the field of view to a display screen behind the patient. You're looking at the patient or at the structure or the part of them that you need to, and your hands can be focused on what you need to do. The other thing is I talked about this adaptability component. We learned that we developed and deployed earlier versions of this 6 to 7 years ago, and it was very clear that physicians didn't want to go through the basic tutorial stuff. They wanted to get to the procedure. They don't need a refresher. So that would be frustrating if they had to go through the same ultra simplified stepwise presentation. Likewise, or contrawise, if someone had no idea what they were doing, they might need a little bit of context, a little refresher to help them understand what they're doing and what they're trying to do. And the last part is, again, when we say medical autonomy, we don't mean that they're left entirely on their own until they come back from Mars. Really, we're going to have important gaps in the ability to communicate in real time, again, at certain locations of Earth versus Mars, again, up to 40 minutes round trip. So whenever you have a medical event or medical situation that you're trying to address on mission, the system needs to record everything that's going on and make it into a consolidated report that gets beamed back to mission control so that the flight doctors there can say they can maintain an awareness of what's going on, give support or if it maybe even corrective instruction as to what they need to do, and also monitor longitudinally how the injured crew member is doing and give information on long-term support or other procedures that may need to be done. All right. You've heard me say this before, but in the context of what I'm going to show you is that when NASA approached us about evolving the Vulcan system that you saw me introduce earlier, what we decided to do was, looking at the risk list for all the things that could happen that we need to have countermeasures for, that we need to have, treatment for. The most difficult thing on the list to us was conducting a pericardiocentesis, a pericardial effusion that requires that to stabilize the cardiac function. And so that's what we did. We worked on it in a 6-month period. Again, I don't want to bore you with too much NASA terminology and things like that, but it's not just us. There's a number of entities at NASA that are working on tools to both prepare for Mars, meaning before then, clinical decision support, impact. The acronym is not important, but basically it's how you logically plan for the likely scenarios. We can't fly every piece of medical equipment we'd like to have, so you have to look at a risk-benefit ratio for all that, et cetera, et cetera. So, so it's an integrated process between Johnson Space Center, who I work with largely. My funding right now is out of Glenn. So we have a number of teams, including AIMS, that are working together to sort of pull together a comprehensive system. All right. So secondary goals for the project. So the other things that we have done for other NASA projects is use augmented reality to assist crew members on space station and to identify and locate equipment. Where is it? How much inventory do we have? Or when you get a resupply, for those that are familiar with spaceflight and operations on ISS, the crew members rotate every 6 months, maybe a year. So when you have a resupply, you have a bunch of packages of things that need to be sorted into the space station. So where do they go? Do you have things that need to be sent back down? So really just inventory management, including medical inventory, drugs and other things, that might be required. Again, you heard me talk about a reporting capability, the ability to record all dialogue and everything that's going on, particularly when you have a treatment scenario and you need the flight docs and mission control to understand everything that's been done so they can best support, again, with a little bit of a delay, maintenance of crew health. The other thing is, as you'll see further in the presentation, it seems like a complex system. In the most recent phase, we've actually dramatically improved both the time and the time it takes, meaning reduce the time it takes to put new methods into the system, and also enable for tweaks or updates on an ongoing basis. And I'll show you that in specific detail. And particularly with the pericardiocentesis, we wound up developing a method and implementing it very, very fast. And again, as I said, we've evolved this dialogue, hands-free dialogue interface. So you don't need to click on buttons or do hand gestures. You can talk to the system, and it has enough discernment to understand what you're asking and give you stepwise guidance or feedback or information as needed. All right. You've seen this for those that were part of the earlier presentation. My nice little cartoon display. So this is an example of the system. I won't delay on this. I believe these slides will be available for afterwards. And again, this is a more of a larger view of the earlier. This is from 2015, 2016, the earlier system. And again, this is Blue Phantom that Zolt Garami at Methodist graciously let us use for doing the carotid procedures. So, so just again, overall history, the Vulcan, again, we primarily are focused on ultrasound right now, but the technology is agnostic. We don't care what medical device you have, as long as you can identify controls, correct procedures, correct outcomes. That's really what is needed to inform the machine learning and to give correct procedural guidance and procedural feedback. Again, when it comes to ultrasound, we started off with a very nice Vivid E95, which we still use. We also have moved, as NASA's interested in what are we going to fly on missions? So they're looking at more lightweight, highly capable probes. So we've integrated with Claris, Hilcerion, Butterfly IQ. We're about to get GE's got a new lightweight handheld probe. We're going to get that and integrate with that. To date, we've got 5 U.S. patents issued, both method and technology for this. So the patents cover any medical device. There's this continuum of sensing, machine learning, and procedural guidance driving you towards correct outcome is novel. We have 5 patents issued, and we have EU and Canadian patents that are on the way. Very quickly, we talk about this adaptive user interface. I mentioned it earlier. Spaceflight is a very difficult environment to operate in, even though some of the best and brightest individuals, aspire to be astronauts. Some become astronauts. We've learned from the longer duration missions, even the Apollo missions, which were really not that long in duration. There are important decrements in normal functionality that you would expect terrestrially that will affect your ability to retain information, to do motor, cognitive, gating, things like that. Again, microgravity causes neurovestibular alterations and everything like that. So whatever we do with the system has to adapt in how it presents things in terms of content, font size, brevity or length. Do you need video? Do you need text? It has to be adaptive to get that individual information that they need in that moment, in the state they're in, to get the job done. So that's a core part of the engine too, is adaptive information based upon, again, state and skill or background training. All right. Another thing that we use, and I don't want to get too deep in the weeds on engineering technology, but for those that have an engineering background or familiar with this, we use model-based systems engineering. Simply stated, it becomes like a visual representation of interactions, all the interactions of the system. And so how this is important to how we're developing this system for NASA is I've got technical partners at other centers at NASA. My chief medical consultant, Dr. David Hilmers, currently now is in Australia. And so the ability to communicate as we're developing the system, it's like, okay, here's the proposed methodology for doing pericardiocentesis. So Dr. Hilmers gives us, okay, here's the standard clinical procedure as taken from so-and-so, whatever his reference is. Here's some videos on how to do it. So what we do is we take that, refine it for the environment we're working in, and we capture this all in the model-based systems engineering so that we get peer review, peer refinement, and that everyone on the team understands what we're doing as we're developing these capabilities. And part of the capabilities are methodology. So I'll get to this in a second, but this approach really helped us when it came to pericardiocentesis. So I'll save commentary on that until we get to it. Again, activity diagrams. For any user, whether it's the physician or a non-physician one, everything that they're going to be doing interacting with the IMCA. This allows us to anticipate. So for example, a trained clinician would just know things that they wouldn't have to ask a question. They certain steps in the procedure they've done 1,000 times, whatever like that. If you're not an expert, there may be some pretty simple questions. What is an ultrasound? How do I hold the probe? Simple things like that. So we have to model for each user type how they might interact with the system. And again, what I'm talking about is the dialogue-based interface, of course, and that all Vulkan is part of that now. All right, so moving along. One of the first things that we did is that we already had an augmented reality procedure for the EFAST protocol. And for those clinicians and sonographers or people who are familiar with this, it's a very common one for trauma or other emergency type assessment. Since we already had that, we under what used to be called the NSBRI, which is now TRISH, we plugged that into the system. So the relevance of this is we don't have to invent every single bit that goes into Vulkan or IMCA. If it exists, it's validated, we can rapidly put it in the system so that it's usable. I fully expect by the time we go to Mars, many of these procedures or the technologies used in them will have evolved incrementally. Those can be rapidly updated or included in the suite of procedural support and training materials we have. All right, moving along. Again, I don't want to get too far into this. I'm happy to demo it. If anyone's interested, contact me. You can come by and visit. We'll show you the system. But this is even a more drilled down screen of the actual dialogues. We've created a dialogue editor, and we've tested it with, we have non-physician crew members. So specifically in the case of the project, I have a former astronaut, Jean-Luc Chrétien, who's a general in the French Air Force, an excellent aviator, has flown a number of missions on a space shuttle and also some Soviet spacecraft. So excellent astronaut, very bright guy, but he's not a physician. And then on the other hand, we have David Hilmers, who's a former Marine test pilot, astronaut, and then after all that, after a number of missions, went to medical school and is a physician. So I have two different astronaut analogs that have different, skills and training, and we developed dialogue trains with both of those individuals. How would they, use Jean-Luc, his response to things, we present him the emergency medical situation, and the things that he says are different than what Dr. Hilmers, his first thing to say and the first thing to do. So again, this is part of the diversity. We need to make sure the system works for all crew members. All right, a little further down. I'm not going to delay on this. This is just for those that are into system architecture. So Iris is the engine of dialogue interface. I should point out that the initial versions of the system were dependent on cloud, Google Cloud. We now have systems we have a local cloud, meaning, we're not expecting to be able to access the cloud around Earth when we go to Mars. So we need to have our own cloud. So we have a version of it now that is independent or agnostic to connectivity to the Earth-based cloud. All right. So I'll go very quickly. I've already said some of this stuff. Again, what I'm going to walk you through here is we're walking up to a pericardiocentesis procedure. Again, you have to go through the initial diagnostic portions of it. So again, we picked the hardest thing on the list. Maybe this is an appropriate time to mention that this project completed this summer, and we have very graciously been awarded with a much larger grant to do a whole other range of procedures and diagnostic procedures and also treatment procedures for NASA for the system. Again, I've said some of this before. I don't want to repeat it again. It's in the records for you folks to look at. Again, I walked everyone through the interface here. I think I can take questions or comments a little bit later. But this shows you a lot of the system, and more importantly, it shows you from the user's point of view. Everything you need, all pulled together. All right, let me advance the slides here again. So very quickly, if you recall the system diagram I showed a few slides ago, this here is a full system diagram. And if you can see my arrow here, this stack of the layer right here is the procedure management tool. We call it Procedure Genius. NASA calls it EPROC, but it's electronic procedures that can work on smartphones, tablets, augmented reality head-mount displays. So you have a single repository for expert instructional content on how you do things on spacecraft. And again, usable by a number of different technologies, smartphone, tablet, AR head-mount display, things like that. What we call Vulcan, which is the procedural guidance engine. This over here is for NASA's developing an architectural concept for how we're going to manage crew member data, both pre-flight but during flight. So MDA stands for Medical Data Architecture. So we'll have a repository of on-mission and maybe even pre-flight. So, physiological, structural scans of the individual crew members. So that's another layer to the system. Again, down here, medical device, in so much as the technologies enable it, we can actually either just take display or other telemetry out of a medical device. For those devices that have open access to controls, we can also control the device. So you don't have to use standard keyboard, mouse, and other peripherals to communicate with a system. All right, moving along here. So want to introduce you to some of the players and the videos that we're going to be seeing here in a second. So this is a Clarius probe. This is the standard, smartphone application that the Clarius communicates with. This is a box. This is created for us by a company called Incorus. They do other medical training fixtures, like kidney and other fixtures like that. So they were gracious enough to make us a custom-built Phantom specific for this project and this application. So inside of it, what this is a 3D model of the sternum and also the rib cage structures. There's a heart in there. So that's part of the system. All right. Here we're getting into some of the magic. So by virtue of our machine learning pipeline, where if you heard my earlier talk, I talk about we program our machine learning, or we feed it many data sets that are correct, meaning this is a perfect picture of a pericardial infusion, or this is the location you should be in to have the opportunity to see subcostally, right, the pericardium, and to assess it. And we do it the wrong way. And we do it the wrong way many times as well. So what comes out of that is, again, the blue box is identifying the heart. So for this procedure, it knows that you're looking for the heart subcostally. So it has hundreds, if not thousands, of images of correctly and incorrectly visualized via ultrasound heart from that perspective. Secondarily, with the Phantom, we can either fill it up with fluid and make it simulating an effusion or not. So in the case of this red box, it's detecting, hey, based upon how I've been trained, I believe that there may be a pericardial effusion right here. All right. So again, adjunctive diagnostic. We're not trying to take over that. So very quickly, so I'm going to get into showing you the video. Hopefully it goes well, the video. So first of all, here's the scenario. So again, we picked a very complex emergency medical scenario on a spacecraft. So a crew member is, happily going about their duties, and there's some type of a rapid release of pressure from a container. In this case, it's a pressurized bottle, strikes the crew member in the chest. All right. So then what happens is another crew member, so the injured crew member is unconscious. So another crew member hears a noise and comes into the the area of the spacecraft, doesn't know what has happened, and they're trying to figure it out. All right. Then, of course, other crew members, they call other crew members in. And in this case, the crew member, in this case for this scenario, has some medical training, but is not an expert physician. They start talking to the intelligent crew medical agent, all right, and tells them what to do. So let's get right into it. I hope you can hear the sound too. Again, if you can't, I'll make it up to you. I'll present it to you directly.
Hey, I found a crew member unresponsive.
Secure patient in place for primary survey. Is there another crew member available?
No, it's just me.
When another crew member arrives, instruct them to retrieve the ID and diagnostic sensor kit. Is patient fixed in place?
Yes.
All right. So this is the first video. So you hear in there a individual crew member is attending to their stricken crew member, and they can talk to the system and say, okay, what do I do in general? Primary signs and symptoms, and like that. All right. So again, without walking you through the storyboard, this is it. After primary signs and symptoms, it identifies the system. IMCA does. Hey, it looks like we have some trauma in the chest area, so we need to do an ultrasound examination. So let's move on to that.
Activate fast procedure.
And again, I'm going to pause real quick here. So again, you have this mirror display right here is for people standing in the room to see that as well, or remotely. So you have the ultrasound controls right here, and then you'll have the stepwise procedures. So let's move through. And again, those windows are all configurable.
With ID Fast Clarius. This procedure is for expert users and includes 5 sub-procedures. Select a procedure from the list. Right upper quadrant, left upper quadrant, lower abdomen, subcostal, thoracic.
Subcostal.
If desired, please watch the video refresher on your HoloLens. Place probe under xiphoid pointing towards the left lateral clavicle with reference marker pointing to left.
Next.
Adjust probe to obtain 4-chamber image as above. Check for pericardial effusion.
Next.
Press Store. Repeat for 3 stored images, then proceed to the next scan.
Next.
You're done subcostal, subxiphoid.
All right. So in this video right here, I intentionally showed the boxes to sort of the raw machine learning, imputed identification of structures like that. In the production system, what we'll also have is we'll have arrows and animations that show you how to manipulate the probe. In other words, if you have an inferior view, pardon me for using a suboptimal view of the heart or the pericardium, it'll give you arrows and other animations to show you how to manipulate the probe. Again, the system knows, in general, from looking at the camera, your position on the probe, but also the ultrasound image, if you have a correct aperture, if you're maybe not pushing in the probe far enough, things like that. So it gives you 3-dimensional cues as to how to get the probe right, and again, to get the right type of visualization. All right, so I want to get to the fun stuff. Pericardiocentesis. I know for clinicians, it's one of your favorite things to do.
We've identified cardiac tamponade. We need to activate pericardiocentesis procedure.
Starting procedure with ID Pericard Clarius. This procedure guides the user in the performance
Starting
of emergency
three-point initialization.
pericardiocentesis if the patient is hemodynamically unstable as a result of cardiac tamponade. Contacting mission control to report the situation and request guidance. Don the HoloLens for step-by-step instructions and display of the ultrasound imaging and EKG tracing.
Next.
The needle should be inserted parallel to the probe and directed at a 30 to 45 degrees angle towards the left shoulder at the mid-clavicular line. The needle will appear on the screen as a hyperechoic structure with reverberation artifact and should be used to guide the advancement towards the pericardium.
You can see the needle in the sort of the top right of the ultrasound, the needle track going in. So for this one, we stop. We stop it. We're not going to actually puncture it. That's for a subsequent video that we'll show later, not in this presentation, but we hook up the sac and drop the fluid and things like that. So again, procedural guidance in that. I'm mindful of time, so I'm going to try to run through stuff real quickly. So the value of using this model-based system engineering approach in developing this technology is really the following. So the method I showed you right there, this pericardiocentesis with Phantom, once we had the Phantom in place, we developed and implemented this procedure in less than a week. We did the augmented reality machine learning in 3 to 4 days to reinforce the procedure, and the AR method was in 24 hours. So using this tool chain that we've developed, you can create a new procedure, with IMCA dialogue-based interactions. You can have Vulcan support you in ultrasound or other equipment operation. And in the case of this, with pericardiocentesis, the actual treatment method, we actually have both AR methodology and machine learning reinforcement of correct and incorrect things. So fairly quickly. So in phase 2, which we are now actively involved in, we're going to have at least 20 diagnostic plus procedural things that we're going to enter into the system. And of course, the final product will have some, fancier animations and things like that for 3D cues and guidance. So again, I don't want to confuse everyone with phase 1, phase 2 for thing, but the highlighted elements in black are ones that we have currently in the system. The ones that are not highlighted are ones that are part or envisioned or planned part of the entire system. Again, we're going to what's called a technical readiness level 7, meaning it's ready for analog testing and ground-based simulants of spaceflight, maybe even getting close to ready for International Space Station testing. Have a pretty talented and broad team, including Dr. Kelling, human factors consultant from UH Clear Lake. We have 2 astronauts. We have a great technical team.